Welcome back, everybody, to your daily update on the state of the Malazan Empire. And I hope I won't fade into the darkness anytime soon. But I got distracted because I had to listen to the new Crossvolt album before I could record this. And yeah, don't ask. Go just listen to that album. It's actually really good. Um, if you like sad doom metal, but in that case, go check out Crossvolt. They're great. Let's have us a talk on the Crippled God, Book 4. And nothing happens. Ah, no, it happens. Cheers. All right. So let's look at the next book of the Crippled God, and what we have there is mostly, it's 3 chapters. First chapter, Malazans. Second chapter, people at the shore. Third chapter, the rest of the people, like Letheri, Gachain Jamal, and what I called Volcando. That's the word. Anyway, so I just want to pick out a couple of few things in there, and I feel like most of it's gonna be like the first and third chapter of that book, because the middle one is a lot of battle scenes. I'm gonna look into some of it. There's a lot of action, takes up a lot of page count, and the important thing there is that Steven Erikson is incredibly good at writing down battle scenes, and we all know that. The way he jumps from person to person and makes it so even the large scale epic army against army battles, so very very personal, which is absolutely important, because what we tend to do is when we speak about wars, it's like one of those sad things that we have, like not sad, but sad when you look at it from the outside. When we look at individual homicide or murder or whatever, an individual death is hits us really hard. But when there's an official war and there's soldiers dying, suddenly they become all numbers. And Steven Erikson is incredibly good at, just by how he describes these mass combat scenes, these war scenes, to make us realize, or at least not forget, that those are just actual people fighting there, doing their damnedest to survive. That's the main thing within, I feel, that middle chapter. Gods, I'm dumb to actually start with the middle one, aren't I? Anyway, point being, the other thing in there that we see is a look at the Tist Leo Sun. I'm always careful to not talk too much about them, because I feel since I haven't read Carcanas yet, I'm probably missing a lot there. But right now they feel they're obviously sort of the enemy. They've gone astray from being Tist Leo Sun to seeking out their new god, which are dragons, which they murder. And there's an image in there that we need to talk about at some point. The idea of murdering a very powerful being, taking in their essence to become, make them our gods, and then use all of that to further some deeper lying ambition. That's not healthy, is what I'm trying to say here. But yeah, I want to have another look at the Tislios, and before I go deeper into that. And outside of that, well, there's a lot of I guess the other part about outside of the battle scenes, which are glorious, is the trouble, the trauma, and the absolute desperation of Sanderlath through Cornet. And I remember when I first read it, I was really suffering through her parts. Like I absolutely did not like Sandalath Cordat's parts in Carcanas. The whole thing with her being a hostage and falling back into that, and I absolutely I did not appreciate it. I hated it, to be completely honest, right? And reading it again this time round, I'm like, there's something in there. For one, I don't know her past. I suspect I might get some more of it in the Carcanas trilogy. I hope so. We'll see. Um, but also the fact that no matter what happens to you, those, and this is like something that I've like picked up over the entirety of them. My current read through is like, the idea that things that happen to us in childhood, in our youth, will stay with us and form our lives throughout like the entirety, whether it's like a couple of decades or it's millennia. The traumas of our childhood, of our youth, will stay with us. They will like, form and like transform and so forth. Every experience, color every experience we have in our lives. And that's something that we can see here with Sandal after Cora, right? She's like now she's Queen of House Dark for now, and that's something she can't deal with because of her past, and she's trying to flee from that. She's locked into something that is far like, like the all the responsibilities of her new position, but which she can't actually accept because the only lens she can see them through are is the lens of being a hostage, which is also just being a tool within being a piece, like a gaming piece within a larger play. So she can't like get out of that frame of mind in a way. And I'm going to come back to that, and hopefully I have like smarter things to to say at that point. We'll see. But I just felt it's important to mention that it's one of those parts of the Malazan Book of the Fallen that I really struggle with, and it might come back to that whole idea of it's super difficult to actually read helplessness, to read characters that are helpless and like fail and struggle and just fall apart. It's not something that we're used to when reading fantasy, I guess. All right, but let's let's go to the chapter that I actually want to start with, which is the first chapter of book 4. A lot of Malazans doing a lot of Malazan things, and there's like two or three things that I want to pick out. Like on the one hand, we see the beginning treachery of Fist Blistig. I want to go back to Blistig at a later point, but it's kind of happening, and you have all these soldiers doing all their weird soldiery things. But the one, like, there's two things I want to look at in this chapter. The one is the council in the adjunct's tent when they are talking about the crippled god and what we actually need in the way of faith and understanding and so forth. And the other thing will be a very short thing later on. So let's look at that whole council and the idea of the soldiers needing more, and on the and like this is like one of the, I feel it's not the heart of the novel, but it's very close to it. The point where she says like, who of you has not been broken, who of you has not wept, who of you has not, and so forth. The point that the crippled god embodies something that is in each and every one of us. And this is an important aspect here, right? It's not just the bone hunters. It's in each and every one of us. We've all felt broken and hurt and in pain at some point or other. That's just part of human life. So the crippled God is all of that. But it's important to also not worship that pain, because that's not where you want to go, right? It's like you don't want to kneel before your pain. And I don't know. I guess some of you have been there. I've certainly been there. It's like it's so easy to kneel before that, to kneel before your pain and accept it and like dive into it and wallow in it. It's something that is like it's super super tempting all the time. I'm struggling with it all the time, and so when she's going into like when she's explaining all of that and it's like and Kyla's like, you don't expect me to kneel before that, and she's like, I'm glad you don't. The other important thing there, however, is the idea that once we have ideals, that the idea of religion is that we take these ideals and we turn them into a person. We personalize them, we personify them, we build a religion, we build rituals around it, we build shrines and all of that. And the question is all of that necessary? Which, harkens back to that idea of kneeling before an abstract idea that we spoke about yesterday with Jan Tovis kneeling before the shore. And it once again comes back to that idea that we have like personifying ideas or concepts is one step of religion, but we should also be aware of the fact that that other thing, like just having an idea or having a concept or a group of concepts there, we can still totally go into worship. But worship is not what we need. We need to be aware of it. It's awareness of it and then doing the right thing. Which, once again, it's like something we come back to in like the third chapter of that book is like, it's about doing the right thing. But I feel like this chapter, and especially that council in that tent, is one of those key scenes for the crippled God. The other one that I really want to highlight, though, is the debate, or not debate, but like the conversation between Hanar Weigolf, the outrider, and Lostara Yill. And when he's talking about his maid and the stories she told him and all of that, and the idea that all these glorious heroes' tales with happy ends that she told him as a kid were not meant for him, but were meant for like her. This is something that I think we should keep in mind when reading books like the Malazan Book of the Fallen, because all of this is also a story about like, why do people write stories? Why do people tell stories? Is that to entertain us? Is that to entertain themselves? Is that to make a point to us, or is that to make a point for themselves? And I feel it's important to keep that, like, those musings about the motivations that storytellers have, to keep those in mind and keep those in our hearts, because one thing that we always talk about in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, when it comes to all these things that are in there, all these themes, right? We do that all the time. But I feel this like short conversation between Hanar Weigolf and Lostara Yill is one of those keys. It's like, why does Stephen Erickson tell us this story about empathy and compassion and all these other things that happen? Is it to entertain us, or is it because the author wants the things that happen in this story to actually be true? Now, obviously not the full on, dinosaurs with swords cutting down folklore assail. Probably that too, but point being, the meta thing in there, the idea that maybe empathy and compassion could win, is that something that maybe, you know, is this tale just a tale or is this also a wish? And I feel that's something that we should keep in mind with a lot of stories that we read, with a lot of books we read. The questions like, is this just for entertainment? Is this just like an experiment, like a thought experiment, or is there maybe also that driving wish behind that this may just become true? Now, obviously, hopefully doesn't go for all kinds of stories because I can think of some that I really hope that the author really doesn't wish those things to come true. But apart from that, I feel it's important to understand that telling stories is often also very much about wish fulfillment for the storyteller, not just for the reader or listener. All right. What else do we have? Um, I just love that meeting between Abrastal and her daughter and Hood standing on the side, and that side conflict between Hood and Spax. That one is just really glorious. But I know it's not really where we want to go with this. I feel with that last chapter, apart from like moving pieces into place with Faint and Ambi Bowl and Precious Thimble showing up, the idea of the holes becoming active again. I love that conversation, not conversation, but that thing that like Erinic, when she thinks about what she talks about with Precious Thimble about this idea, how power is created by wandering, then holds, then warrens, and so forth. Um, I feel there's something in there that I'm not quite qualified to look at, but I love the idea that power is created by wandering patterns that then turn into holes and all these other things. Um, I didn't know where I was going with that, but I love that conversation because it comes back to that whole idea of the hold of darkness, or like the gate to darkness being not a hold but being actually always wandering with on that cart in within Dragnipur, for example. But um, no, what I wanted to look at is that conversation that Gessler and Caliph have, and Gessler's has with Bent the dog, and that like talk he has with the dog, it like breaks my heart every time I read it. But we're gonna come back to that later on, I feel. No, but the idea that it's not about humans versus nature, but it's about or not just human, but the idea of like willpower, and a discerning will that will is all the same, which is something I've said before. It's not just about humans. When I say humans, I always mean Jughood and all these other groups as well. But the idea of intelligent life, so to speak, intelligent, being very much at odds with the rest of nature in a way, which echoes that conversation that Spax has with Abrastal as well. This idea is like, if nature will win, which it ultimately will, like what's the best way for nature to win, and should it be like one glorious final battle, which you know and this is like the weird idea that it's like when you have people like Tanakalian and leading the Greyhounds, and on the other side like Olar Ethiel being sort of the same. Like they want like a final slaughter. That's not how nature works. It's a slow process. So they're already impressing human ideas and human will onto nature when they're doing what they're doing. Um, yeah, but yeah, that conversation between Gessler and Kazeth and around Bend and that whole idea of it being a fight between humanity or like all sentient life and or like intelligent life or whatever you want to call it and nature, and the big question whether intelligent life is actually worth saving. That's sort of, I mean, that's been like the question ever since Dust of Dreams, I feel. We're getting closer to the end here. Anyway, I'm out of ideas, so I'll leave you, or in the darkness, I guess. And I'll talk to you on Monday about book 5 of The Crippled God, and I have something else for you tomorrow, and hopefully on Sunday. Until then, cheers.